Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Encores Club. Why is that? Because we are talking about Duran's new album, Future Past. Been waiting on this one for at least a couple years, maybe longer. It's been a while since that Paper Gods tour. So finally, we have new music from Duran. As always, I'm Velvet Rebel, Rhonda from Daily Duranie, and if you haven't figured it out by now, we are both huge Duran fans. So this one is really special for us. This is our first impressions. We've had a few days to listen to the music, but obviously it hasn't fully integrated itself into our lives. So anything we say today, if you disagree, we may come back and change our minds. But let's talk Future Past. First impression, what do you think?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this album, it's eclectic because I really get the feeling like they decided to, like, it's a retrospective really of like everything that they've done in a lot of ways. And I don't mean that they consciously said, okay, let's do a song from, the debut and Rio and Notorious. It's just that it feels to me like an album that naturally should have followed all of those. And so, I mean, there's little bits that you hear from everything, and you're like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for. This is what I would expect Duran to sound like in 2021. Um, it's just, they've just carried elements from everything and made it modern. I don't know. Is that where you're coming from on this?
Yeah, one thing I'm excited about with this album, the title Future Past, and listening to some of them talk about in interviews, that it's kind of coming to terms with no matter how hard you try to be modern and future, it's always going to end up in the past anyway. And for once, I feel like they're actually comfortable with their legacy. They're
Yeah.
comfortable with the nostalgia of all the great hits, and instead of trying to resist that, which they consciously did on albums, Paper Gods to a degree, definitely Red Carpet Massacre.
Oh yeah.
I think that they just set that aside and said, let's just be Duran, and whatever that sounds like this year is what it sounds like. And for me, a much better product came out of that.
Oh, yes. I mean, by far. I'm so grateful that they had, that the whole, pandemic to work on this, to go back and revisit, because I do feel like they finally have hit that point where they're like, it's okay. You know, yeah, we're Duran and we own it. And they should. They 100% should. And it just, all of that confidence goes into this. And it honestly is one of the first albums that I have heard since the 80s where I can hear all of them. You know what I'm saying? I know that, Coxon, he's not from the band. I know that. But I can hear the guitar, and it doesn't feel like it was just dropped in. It's like it was meant to be there.
Yeah.
I, so I don't know. I think we should just go through every single song and just review the whole thing.
Yeah, let's go through it. And we don't have the bonus tracks yet. I know on Twitter
No,
some
no.
people already have the CDs. I got the email saying my shipment is delayed, and
Yeah.
yeah, so we'll wait patiently to hear the Velvet Rebel Newton tribute or whatever that is for me. But just looking at the tracks that came out on the regular album, starting with Invisible, which we've had for quite a while.
Right.
I still stand by my original statement, which I think we even talked about on a show, that this is the best lead single the band's released since the 80s, because it's not trying to be something that they think people will like. It's just something they like. And it's a little darker, it's a little deeper, and it's the right lead single and the right album opener for a post-COVID world.
Right. No, I agree with you 100% on that. Um, I will say that in listening to Invisible, this I had such a completely different vision for this album than what I ended up, hearing. And I'm actually thankful for it. But I would never have guessed it to sound like it does, having listened to Invisible first. But yes, it's 100%. I still love that deconstructed sound to it. I like that it's slower. I love that it's dark. And I still say it feels like the song they were trying to write with You Kill Me with Silence.
Mhm.
I still say that. So yeah,
And for me, the low end on it is so deep. It just shakes your speakers. And I didn't get that a lot on Paper Gods. And
no.
so right out of the gate, I'm already like, okay, this just sonically to me already sounds better than the previous album. And it kind of kicks off the album on a high note.
Absolutely.
Uh, but if it's darker, the light isn't far behind with the next two songs.
Oh no. Yeah, so they literally they turn it on its head when it comes to all of you. I mean, you start off thinking, okay, wow, this is going to be a dark album, and then all of you comes on, and I'm like, oh, I was really wrong. I was wrong. Um, it's as danceable as anything on Rio, I think, and it's just there's this really strong beat, but the whole song is so light. It's it's like I described it as it's like somebody came into the castle and just opened up the drapes.
Yeah.
And the thing I love about this album, just in general, is I'm so glad that Errol Alkin, pushed John to do more because it is truly like one of the best bass lines. The whole album is just filled with John Taylor's bass line, the way that I know it to be from the 80s. And I love it. And it's not that it's an 80s sound, it's that they're letting him play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that it's a very nice pop song in the way that I think they achieved on Liberty with a few songs where it doesn't feel overly produced.
No.
And Nick's not doing too much atmosphere. It's more just direct melody. And for me, it's just a really well constructed pop song that Duran Duran's always been great at doing. And I feel like the production isn't trying to overwhelm it with doing too much. And it's just, to me, it could have popped on to Liberty or an album like that. But I mean, for me, it's better than most of what's on Liberty. I just think it's a really nice pop song.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's why I keep going back all the way to Rio because I feel like that was one of probably their last truly honest pop records. I know that a lot of people liken some of that to new wave, and sure, there's some new wave on there, but I mean, it was pop, and I feel like this is clean in its
Yeah.
production, like Rio would have been. When they start getting into like Seven and the Ragged Tiger, I felt like they were throwing so much effect and production and just too much of everything. Um, I still love that album, but it doesn't mean that I can't see, that things could have been done different.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we get into one of our first collaborations,
Mhm.
which for me on this album, the collaborations work. They make
Yeah.
sense. They're more prominent. So, what's your impression of Tove Lo's appearance?
I was really surprised because I've actually seen her live, and I always thought she was very good. I've always thought that. I think I saw her when she opened for Coldplay, and she's an excellent performer. I have always been concerned about her though because I felt like she tries to be overtly sexual and she relies on that. And this there's none of that. I feel like she might be sexy sounding just because of the fact that she's just singing, herself. And I like that. And her voice is perfect with Nick's keyboards and the whole sound. I mean, it works really well. And it's interesting because when I first heard the song, wait, where did they play that on the
It was
Today
on
Show?
one of those TV appearances, and I think most of us were a little underwhelmed at the
I
time.
was very underwhelmed. I was like, oh, okay, well, we'll see how it goes. I didn't say too much about it because you just never know. But hearing it on here, I was like, whoa, this is a totally different song.
Yep.
So I really liked it. I said it does. It feels very electronic. What's interesting is I wrote down Last Night in the City for this one, and I think it's because of the electronics
Hmm.
that are in it, but yet it's not so overwhelming to where you can't hear the band.
No, it
And that
doesn't.
makes
It
me
does.
down.
I wouldn't say it crosses over into EDM,
No,
which is good for me. And I think as we go through this album, I started to see songs paired, and for me, those two songs, very bright, colorful, modern pop songs. So,
yeah,
boom, there you have that. And if you want to call that the future, but I think the next two songs are very much a look to the past. Um,
agreed.
and Anniversary is intentional, if nothing else.
It is. That's the sentimental favorite, I think, in a lot of ways, just because even if you don't like love what they did with it, just the idea that they took so many different sounds from songs that, were in their past
Mhm.
and put it on here as a celebratory tune for all of us. how can you not love it? And it's fun. I mean, not every single song has to be this hard hitting, deep meaning, you know, um I don't know, it doesn't have to go that route. And I feel, I feel like anniversary, and there's actually another one on here that I feel is just fun.
Mhm.
And that's okay. I like that. Sometimes you need those moments, especially after the few years we've had.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it for what it is. It's a bit of a pastiche of, all the different songs. I hear Union and the Snake in it more and more, that there's a little keyboard
Mhm.
thing. It's almost like the radio signal type thing.
Yeah.
For me, I don't know if I love it in the middle of the album, because to me it's almost like a standalone single.
Yeah.
Almost like Is There Something I Should Know really didn't fit on the debut once you forced it in there after the fact. It was great as a standalone single
Mhm.
because of what it represents and almost being a gift to the fans. I would love to have seen it as its own 12-inch release, maybe with a couple remixes. But that's not to say it's not well done, and I think it's almost like a modern Burning the Ground, but instead of actually using all the samples, they just wrote a new song, and it works. And again, that goes back to what I was thinking, that they're finally embracing their history and not trying to hide from it and say they're only going to be contemporary. That it's okay to recognize that you have an amazing legacy and it's time to celebrate it, and that's what Anniversary is.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always felt like they've tried to, they always like to say that they are not nostalgic. They don't look back. And I've always said, as the owner of Daily Duranie, I've always said, you know, that's fine. You don't want to look back, that's fine, but that's sort of our job.
Yeah.
And I'm I like the idea that they're finally are, saying it's okay. Because it is okay. You've had 40 years, for Christ's sake. I mean, it's all right.
Yeah.
So
And then the next one definitely stays in kind of that nostalgic vein. It's the title song, Future Past. And for me, as I try to pick out favorites, this one's one of my top three songs, believe it or not.
oh, I'm not surprised because I like it that well too. I really do. I don't know that I have favorites yet on this album because I'm still like, every time I listen, I'm like learning more things. But I do. I really like this one. I love the song. I love the way it sounds. I like the lyrics, although I have not yet been able to even pour over those.
No, I put in a review I posted online. I'm not always sure what Simon's singing about, and I don't even try. I just know when the phrases sound right. He's a
Yeah.
genius, and I accept that. Um, the drums on this, the rhythm, kind of with the a hi hat that comes and goes.
Mhm.
There's an '80s song, and it's not a Duran Duran song, but there's an '80s song that is so much like, and I cannot. I've been spending a week trying to remember what song it is, and it'll come to me. I'll probably be listening to First Wave or something, and I will finally figure it out. But if you're watching at home and you instantly know what I'm talking about here, please tell me the song because it's driving me crazy. But there's an '80s song that uses very much the same rhythm track, and I cannot remember it for the life of me.
It's interesting because there's a few songs, and probably all of them, where I'm like, where do I know this from? And I don't know what has happened to my memory because I cannot figure out like where I'm hearing some of this. I'm like, oh, I know that sound. There's something that Nick plays, and I don't even remember what song it's on now, but he plays it and it sounds just like something from New Order, where it's like it starts off. It almost sounds like a helicopter taking off because it's like, and it gets bigger. I couldn't tell you. I'm like, has he done that on another song? I don't, and I'm sure he has. But yeah, the brain just doesn't work anymore. That's what's wrong.
Yeah, the elements are there, and it's them being them, which is exciting. And I think Future Past is one. I haven't loved the ballads since the '80s, really. So
Yeah.
for me to get excited about that, I was like, finally, there's a slower song that I can really get excited about. Hold the Lighter Up if they play it live, which would be
Yeah.
amazing. And then the album takes a shift again. We had two songs of contemporary pop, two songs of kind of nostalgic looking back, and then we're headed into the disco, are we not?
Yes, we are. We are. Beautiful Eyes, right? Is that where
Yes.
we're at? Yeah.
And that to me is Marauder's best contribution to this album.
There are two songs on this album that I have yet to really bond with, and this is one of them.
Finally, we disagree on something because this is one of my favorites.
Now, it's not that I don't like it, it's that for whatever reason, it hasn't stood out to me yet. And I don't know why. Um, I keep listening to it. Like today, I was like, oh yeah. And now, I'm getting to the point where I can hum the tune.
Mhm.
Whereas other songs, as soon as I heard it the first time, I was able to hum it and know it. But this is one of them that I'm like, it's not that I don't like it, because there's not a song on this album that I don't like. It's just that one I couldn't recall, after I had finished and I'm writing the review. I'm like, I don't remember what the heck that song sounds like. And I have to go back and listen again. Um, it reminds me a little of Safe off of
Okay.
All You Need Is Now.
Yeah, safe. I was thinking maybe being followed as well on the verses.
Also, yes, I think it's just it does have, I mean, it has a recognizable, disco rhythm to it for sure in parts. It's, you know, it's just I'm hoping that once it's out and I'm really listening to it all the time, I think it's going to end up being the same type of song as, a lot of what was on Paper Gods to me, where it just took me some time.
Hmm.
And so, you know, again, it's not a bad song.
No,
It's good.
I'm coming in as a big Marauder fan, and his solo record from '77, From Here to Eternity, is a huge record for me. It's an album I love, and that title track, From Here to Eternity, I hear that in Beautiful Lies. So
Okay.
right away, for me, that was the Marauder connection. He's famous for doing everything from Daft Punk, Donna Summer,
Mhm,
whatever.
yeah.
This, or Diana Ross, but this to me is, him at his finest, and Duran really embracing that. And I like that, they allowed him to have that much influence on it, because I think it works.
Yeah,
The
they really
second
did. They
song
let
on
him.
this, the second half of that disco Marauder pairing, was Tonight United, which when it came out, it was not my favorite single. And I think it works much better in the album, if that makes sense. I mean, it's the same song, but hearing it after Beautiful Eyes, I think it just elevates the song for me as kind of a nice pairing.
Okay, so Tonight United for me is a great, I can hear where it would be an excellent live song. I love that, they had Saffron sing backup. She's excellent. She gives that song the brightness that it needed in,
Mhm.
especially in all the chanting. Um, I think it's going to do really well live. I think it was good on the album. I don't understand why they chose it as a single.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
It's a weird single choice. I don't think the chorus does a ton.
no, I don't think it does. I think it's going to be a crowd pleaser live.
I just wonder, because then they did that benefit show, and it kind of, World United, Tonight United. Maybe it was just because they knew that chorus had lyrics that would work for that, and they were trying to promote that angle with it, so it became a single. But
Could have been.
um, I don't know.
I don't
Just
really know.
it's probably one of my least favorite songs on the album, but hearing it within the album context, it still works for me.
Yeah.
So then we leave the dance floor, if you will, of the disco, and now we have two very different type songs.
Very different. I don't even know how I would describe it, but that Wing is another song that, as beautiful as it is, I still haven't quite bonded with it yet. That said, I think it reminds me a lot of Mediterranean.
Mm.
And I like that, and it also reminds me a lot of Palomino and Land, songs of that vein, where I think it's going to be one of those things that I look back on and be like, how did I not love that from the first listen? um, the more I hear it, the more I listen to it, the more I'm like, yeah, I get it. I like that, So it's one of those things. There's always growers on song, on albums, and I think this is one of them for me. What
Yeah,
about you?
I totally agree. I think this and Nothing Less, this two song segment, again, I keep falling into these two songs. To me, they're very reminiscent of the second side of Big Thing, and
Hmm.
kind of that moody, darker thing. I also like that it's got some giddy up to it, even though it's a ballad, kind of like Save a Prayer does. As you move through Save a Prayer, it starts to pick up its energy, and the drums come in a little more firm. So I hear a little bit of that, but in terms of the sonic appeal of it, these two songs for me are right out of Big Thing, which is a huge album for me. That's one I really love, and I think they really capture the art of what they do.
Yeah.
So this second half of the album, it's getting more artsy, and I like that. I like where it's headed. So, which takes us to Nothing Less, the other song that I think pairs well with this, and for me, that's quickly becoming my favorite song on the album, I think.
Really? Well, you're gonna be shocked when I tell you what I think my favorite is right now, but we'll get to that. Nothing Less has this really great guitar part on
Yeah,
it.
definitely.
Um,
The
if
solo
I
especially.
had to pick out one thing that I feel like that the album could really have used an improvement on, it's more guitar. It's not that I don't hear it, because I do. And it's not that I don't like Graham Coxon. I do. It's that I just wish there was a little bit more, just a little bit. I miss that rock.
Yeah,
I do. That's the one thing I note that is sort of missing on this album in parts is that. But nothing less, it just leaves me craving a little bit more. Um, and I feel like this song in particular is a very good example of how this album is just a more mature Duran.
agreed. Which I thought big thing was for them in the 80s.
I know, me too. So I think that it is exactly what I would have expected Duran to sound like 4 decades into their career. That's what I wrote for the notes on this song. So,
And
all
you
right.
mentioned wanting more guitar for me, and it's kind of the same thing, the rock and roll side of it. I wish there was a little more of Roger being Roger and playing organic drums and using more of an acoustic kit, which he's probably playing an acoustic kit most of the time, but I think it's triggering electronic samples, which kind of negates the whole purpose of an acoustic kit. But there was times where I felt like the songs could use a little more of a pounding drum sound. But I've been saying that for many years, and I think it's just one of those things that if you grew up on Andy and Roger, you're always going to want a little more of that, and that's okay. But for me, Nick, with All You Need Is Now, they had Nick dust off those old synths and stuff and get that original sound going. I wish Roger would just be forced to play his old kit and just record it as is without adding any effects or anything, just to see how it would work on a song. But it's a minor quibble because within this album, I think what Roger's doing and the guitars, it does work. It just
Yeah.
sometimes you want a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Don't you think it would be interesting though, you know, when you listen to this, um, it's like you said, and I'm always really hesitant to say, oh, it sounds more like electronic drums or not, because I kind of made that argument with Paper Gods, and someone that deeply admire was like, those are real drums,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying that they're not. I am saying though that they uh, they don't come out in the same way, and so my argument is okay, but you know what, we even with John played, you know electronic bass,
Yeah, the synth
keyboards
bass on
really
songs.
on Paper Gods, and then he came back and he hasn't done that on this album, and I think the bass is much better received. Couldn't you try that with
Yeah.
Roger as well and see? It's like what you said, but
And don't trigger
just
samples, just keep the sound as drums sound and see what it
yeah,
sounds like. And if it doesn't work, then you can go back, but I think it would work.
I do
And,
too.
and I'm, I'm
I don't.
hoping live they let that kind of be unleashed a little bit more. And we'll have
Yeah,
to wait and see because we still are waiting on a full US tour, but I'm sure it's coming and I'm sure the pre sale prices will be just delicious.
beautiful.
Beautiful. Well under $100, I'm sure.
I don't
Uh,
want to think about it.
And the next two songs, I think we take a turn into some of the more out there stuff. I'm very curious to see what your take on Hammerhead is.
Okay, so I loved it. I This was the song that I was like, oh God, what am I gonna say? Because I know, I don't love rap. I don't love it. But for this song and the way they did it, it's my favorite song on the album. And I would not have expected that. I mean, I still really love Invisible, but I have to say this is like right there. And I've seen other fans pan it. I'm like, no way, man. I think the rap is cool. I like what the song is about. It amuses me greatly. I like everything about it. It's this smooth jazz. It's got this funkiness to it, but it's excellent. It's modern, and it's not anything like what was on Red Carpet Massacre, which I always felt was very synthetic. This is like real, and I loved it.
Yeah, and I'm not as surprised as I would be because talking to one of our Twitter friends, Erin, she had messaged me about the album. She said this was her favorite song, and for her, I was like, of course it is, because to me it sounds a lot like the Wedding album, and she's a big Wedding album fan. I think it
Yeah.
has kind of that wah wah psychedelic guitar vibe. It's funky. But for me, it works so much better than when they kind of went in this direction on the Wedding album, and definitely when they kind of tried this on the Thank You album. If anything, this song is so good. I am gonna Duran, if you're listening, I forgive you for the Public Enemy cover. no more. I
Well,
will
oh,
never
see, I'm not
complain.
there yet. No,
I
no,
will
no,
never
no,
complain about it again because
no.
you've redeemed yourself. If you're going to incorporate hip hop, this is the way to do it. It works. Ivorian Doll, what she brings to it is an old school sensibility. The style in which she raps is a little more old school, which is more the kind of hip hop I like.
Yeah.
It's not like mumble rap or anything like that. So I think she does a great job and almost steals the track. It's so good.
She
So
totally does. I think she steals the show the whole way. I really, I loved it. And the fact that, they have her in, parts in the beginning, singing the undertone. I dig it. I really do. I don't think, I'll ever be lucky enough to hear them do it live, but I'll lose my mind if they do, because it's just, I think it's fantastic. Really.
I think
This is what I would have expected. So
I think it would work live if they ever expanded the set list to get that far into an album, but I could totally hear it coming out of Come Undone because it's a similar guitar
oh, it is, yeah.
and just kind of Come Undone finishes, but the guitar keeps going and turns into Hammerhead, and then all of a sudden, boom, whoever's singing with them on the tour can step forward. Maybe Dom can take the hip hop side of it. I don't know if that's a skill set, but
I don't know.
they've been making them sing more. So, uh, as someone on Twitter is very quick to point out. But again, one of the more experimental tracks, a little like, are they really doing this? And I would say the same as with More Joy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
When that came
I
out,
remember.
I mean, that one exploded the Duran Duran community. People were taking websites down because of how upset they were about Chai being a part of it. I'm never going to be that person. I was a Chai fan before they ever worked with Duran Duran. I think they're a fantastic band. So I think it's a really adventurous song. I think it really embraces, the fandom that they always received in Japan. I mean, if you go back, I mean, that's always been a huge market for them. And to work with a band like Chai really shows respect for that audience. And if we're going to go back with Anniversary and, I'm just thinking of this stuff now. I should have thought about this before, but it is a celebration of all the fans, and maybe More Joy is another tribute to the fans, maybe in that part of the world, who have really always supported them. And even with Liberty, they were making hit songs over there that didn't chart over here. So I love it. It works for me.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love that song. I think it is so fun, and I think it does embody, like, when you listen to the lyrics, when you watch the video, it embodies what fandom is. About us, embracing one another and going and we're the Duran Duran army in a lot of ways, because it's okay if we make fun. It is not okay if other people do, and it's I think it belongs on this album because I feel like this is such a celebration of everything that they are. And yeah, I couldn't be more pleased. I really couldn't. It's outstanding.
Yeah, that's a great one. And then, much like Invisible was kind of on its own at the beginning, we get to the end, and I'm a huge Bowie fan. So Mike Garson, one of the greatest musicians of all time, and what he did with Bowie on Aladdin Sane, it was going to be hard for me not to like Falling,
Right.
but it's actually better than I even anticipated. I think the beginning and the end, where Garson's kind of just doing his own thing, but the song itself works even if Garson wasn't on it. I think it's a really beautiful track. Again, reminds me a lot of the stuff we heard on the back half of Big Thing, but it's an elegant closer. What a beautiful way to finish an album.
I could not love this song more. I say that and I'm like, oh, but Hammerhead's my favorite. But this is by far my most favorite Duran Duran ballad-esque tune that they have. Um, that piano, it's so gorgeous. And but even if you didn't have that, the song is lush and beautiful and heartfelt. um it is everything that Ordinary World is not for me.
Same.
And I can't even comparing those two songs is like comparing apples and oranges. So when I just want to explain how I feel about this, it's just um outstanding tune. I mean, probably I wrote down here, for me, it is easily the most beautiful Duran Duran song ever written. I love the funk, the slightly jazz flow to it, and this song is really truly the reason why I'm still a Duran Duran fan after 40 years. I can still identify with the band and their music after these decades. And this is exactly what I'm going to be listening to this entire year by far, the from start to finish. I don't think that I've had an album hit me like this um, since I really don't think anything has ever hit me this way since the 80s. I just don't. This is, I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's probably the best, album since 1993, since the wedding album.
Mhm.
I'm going past, way past that. To me, this is right up there with Rio, right up there with the debut for me. It
Wow.
life changing for me, I think.
Cool. So you're going to buy tickets for a concert or two.
I might, yeah, I might.
So, I mean, this album's so strong that if they decided to tour the album and play the whole album, I think people would be really excited for it. It's that good of a record. Coming off of Paper Gods, I didn't know if they had this in them. I really didn't. So I am more than pleasantly surprised.
Yeah,
And they didn't need to push themselves this hard. They didn't even need to make an album. They could have just said, COVID's over. Here's Anniversary. It's a standalone single. Let's go have some fun and do some tour dates, and we'll play all the hits for you. And these new songs need to be heard. They're that good.
yeah.
So
I totally agree. I I really didn't think that they had this in them anymore. Um, and I wouldn't have blamed them if they hadn't. I was convinced that Paper Gods was going to be the end. I really was. Um, and when they said, "Oh yeah, we're going back into the studio," I was like, "Oh, you're gonna do something for the anniversary, and then that's it. I know it." Um, and I had been priming myself for that, that this is it.
mhm.
And yet here we are. And these songs, they so deserve to be heard. They really do. And for anyone out there that thought that this band, was washed up, don't count Duran out. They're like the Phoenix, man. They really are.
And I think whenever
I'm
people
so
do
proud
count
of
them
them.
out, when people have counted them out, is when they come back better.
Yeah.
After the fragmentation stuff, Notorious delivered on all fronts. When they couldn't get on radio if their life depended on it, all of a sudden Ordinary World shows up. So, you know, they have this persistence that is going to drive people insane. If you just choose not to like Duran, you're going to always hate them because they're going to keep coming back and they're going to keep being successful. Because apart from the fact that they made beautiful videos and they're good looking dudes, they're great musicians, they're good songwriters, and that matters. And unfortunately, you got to accept that Duran is an excellent band.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry. So that's our first impression of Future Past. I can honestly say, with Paper Gods, I tried to talk myself into appreciating it more. I didn't need to with this one, and I don't see it losing any momentum for me. I think, looking at this album, I don't see any songs I might get bored with. I don't see an album that I'll start skipping songs. It is just a great album front to back. I think All You Need Is Now was also, but I think that was more of an intentional attempt to recreate the Rio era, and they did it very well, but it didn't feel. I don't go back to it as much as I could because I could just listen to Rio. Whereas this, I'm very engaged by these songs, the songwriting, I'm very interested in it. I like that they didn't try to just be a contemporary pop band with all these upbeats, arena songs. There's some introspection here. I think they're coming to terms with the nostalgia aspect of their legacy, and I think that's great.
Yeah. They don't write, or I should say, Simon doesn't write the way that he used to. There's a lot of fans that are sad, that miss all of that, poetry. And he said something not that long ago in an interview about how, yeah, he's not as poetic as he was because he had to make it up back then. But now he's lived his life. And so he has a lot to draw from. And I, I appreciate that because it's true, sure, I'm 50, I'll be 51 soon. And it's, yeah, there we lived. And so to hear him sing about things that I can truly identify with, it matters more. The songs matter more. The words matter. So, and the music, oh my gosh, it matters. And it's, I don't know. This has been great. It really has. It was worth waiting. The six
Absolutely.
years, I guess it's been since
Yeah.
since Paper Gods. Paper Gods was an album for me that I did. I had to talk myself into what I liked and what I didn't like. It was tough, and this has just been so organic of an experience. It's been so nice to be able to just listen and be like, I like it. It's easy to like it. I don't have to feel like I got to justify it because it's just right there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's This has been great. It will be a great pleasure to, write about this album, to talk about it, to go to shows, and to, foster some, great fan community events, you know, because of this album. So,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
you're on the clock with that. It's time to start playing some daily Duranie.
I'm really kind of stressed. So yeah, I've got a lot to do.
If you haven't heard it yet, officially comes out tomorrow. We're talking a little in advance here. We should have this episode up in a few hours. So if you haven't heard it yet, please go find a copy. This is the Duran Duran album you may have not expected, but it is not going to disappoint you. And let us know what you think down here below in the comments. Talk to us. Let us know. Subscribe. We'd love to talk to you. We'll be back with some more episodes of the Encores Club in the coming months. But right now, I think we're both going to be listening to Future Past for a while.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go listen right now.
So we'll see you again soon.
Peace
Thank you for tuning in.
out.
Take care.